What's up, guys? Neil Orfield here, and I'm going to show you how I will be setting up my fantasy cruncher for tonight's single game slate between the Packers and the Rams. I'll be setting up for the largest field GPP on FanDuel. First thing I'm going to do is rearrange my columns. Got a quick view saved with columns where I want them to be. And what I want to see in the middle of my screen is ownership projections, my projection, and exposure caps that I've set, along with the actual exposures I get to players after I have run a crunch. Next thing I'm going to do is sort by projection. And I'm going to remove every player from my player pool who has a projection of 0. So I'm just clicking and scrolling down here. This is going to save me time when I'm setting up groups later, because these players won't be showing up. It'll be easier to find the players that I actually want to find in there. And I can remove Sammy Watkins as well, because we just got news that he's being waived. All right. Next, I'm going to go into the MVP tab, and I'll set an exposure cap on all players in the MVP tab, starting with a 20%. So that means I can't get more than 20% of any player in the MVP spot. Next, I'm going into advanced options. I work in 2 tabs here, the general tab and the groups tab. Starting in the general tab, unique players per lineup. In a 150 set, I'm leaving this at 1 unique player per lineup. If you're making 40 or fewer lineups, I would change this to 2 unique players per lineup, just for the sake of diversifying your lineups. Of course, you don't have to. That's, if you don't mind having condensed player portfolio, lineup portfolio, that's totally fine. But typically for me, if I'm making 40 or fewer lineups, I set this to 2 unique players. Salary cap, I'm not going to set a minimum. I will set a maximum, just for the purpose of avoiding the most duplicated lineups. Sometimes on FanDuel, you can see lineups that are duplicated 2,000 times. And even though, somebody's lineup gets very lucky enough to win the contest, they still aren't making a ton of money. I want to avoid those lineups. If I'm lucky enough to win, I want to win a lot of money. So I'm going to set a cap in here. One of the easiest ways to get different, I'm going to set the cap at 58,500, leaving 1,500 on the table. Offensive players versus defense. Default is set to max of 2 players. I'm going to change this to 4. So that means that now I can have 4 players from one team against just the defense of the opposing team. Not going to come up a whole lot in my lineup set, but I want to at least allow for it in some lineups. Exposure cap, globally, I'm leaving at 100%. I did set that 20% cap in the MVP spot specifically. And then randomness, I'm going to set to 30%. If you want more control over your lineups, set this number a little bit lower, so that you can, more easily get to the lineups that you want to get to if you want that additional control. Minimum projection included in calculation, the default is set to 3. I'm going to leave that at 3. If there are players who project for fewer than 3 fantasy points who I want in my player pool, I'm just going to boost their projection to above 3. And then players from each team max, I'm going to leave at 4, so I can have 4 players from one team against just 1 of the opposing team. All right, that's it for the general tab. Now I'm going to go into the groups tab. Guys, we have a great offer for new users only. You can get full access to everything Stokastic has to offer for NFL for 3 days free. Projections, ownership, 1v1 tools, lineup generator, top stacks tool, 0 risk because it's all free. So sign up now. The link is in the description of this video. Note that Fantasy Cruncher is an add-on and is not included in this offer. And create some groups around my quarterbacks, starting with Aaron Rodgers in the MVP spot. I'm going to make him my key player. I'll rename this group Rodgers MVP. And then I'm going to sort by position and add all of the Packers pass catchers to a secondary group. Including the running backs who are pretty involved in the passing game for the Packers. All right, so that'll do it for this group now. The decision point here is, do I leave this at 1 or change it to 2? So do I require multiple pass catchers from the Packers when I have Rodgers in the MVP spot? I think in a 150 set, I'm going to leave this at 1. This is another spot where if I were making 40 or fewer lineups, I would probably just change this number to 2 and leave it at that. But for a 150 set, I think I'd be okay with a handful of lineups that have Rodgers in the MVP spot with just one pass catcher in the flex, with the hopes that Rodgers does spike an upside, rushing, throw it to a player who's not in the player pool, something goes a little bit weird. But again, if you're making 40 or fewer, I'd probably change this to 2, and that would be the group. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this at 1. So I could have those lineups, but then I'm also going to give boost to Packers pass catchers to make it more likely that I get to multiple. As usual, I'm going to set a lower boost for the running backs just because they don't rely as much on the passing game, and they already project pretty well. All right. So that's it for this group. Next group, I'm going to do a Baker MVP group. So I'm going to find Baker Mayfield in the MVP spot, make him my key player. Now I'm going to add all of these Rams pass catchers to a secondary group. I don't think you necessarily need to include the running backs for the Rams, just not all that involved in the passing game. Again, though, they did just change quarterback. Maybe it changes a little bit with Baker under center. I think that if you're going to include anyone, it should be just Kieran Williams. I think I'm going to add Kieran Williams to this group. I'm going to leave out Cam Akers. It's a close call, though. If you want to include Cam Akers, certainly you could. But again, for Baker, similar to Rodgers, not a ton of rushing upside. So I'm going to require at least one pass catcher. Again, I'm not going to require 2, but I am going to give boost to make it more likely that I get to 2 Rams pass catchers when I have Baker at MVP. And then in the flex, similarly, I'm going to find Rodgers in the flex, make him my key player, and then add all of these Packers pass catchers to the secondary group. Again, including the running backs for the Packers. And then now, because I have Rodgers in the flex, I can include the Packers pass catchers in the MVP spot as well. All right. Looks good. That'll do it for that group. I'm just going to do that. This is all I'm doing for this group. I'm saying if I have Rodgers in the flex, I want at least one pass catcher from the Packers somewhere else in my lineup. And I'm not going to give boosts or anything. I'm just going to require at least one. And then we're going to do the same thing for Baker. So finding Baker in the flex, make it my key player. And now I'm going to add all of these Rams pass catchers to a secondary group. And then now, because I've got Baker in the flex, I can also add them as MVPs to the secondary group. Okay, looks good, and that's all I'm doing for this group. So that'll do it for my groups. Now I'm going to crunch out 150 lineups to see what comes out. Guys, we have a great offer for new users only. You can get full access to everything Stokastic has to offer for NFL for 3 days free. Projections, ownership, 1v1 tools, lineup generator, top stacks tool, zero risk because it's all free. So sign up now. The link is in the description of this video. Note that Fantasy Cruncher is an add-on and is not included in this offer. And then the only other thing I do in my process, so I set those groups, and then it's kind of a trial and error situation from there. So I'm looking at two things now. I'm looking at the lineups themselves. Individually, do these lineups correlate well enough that I think they have a shot at winning? And then I look at my player exposure. So starting with looking at the lineups, very first one I see is Aaron Rodgers with just Aaron Jones in the flex. It's a little bit thin to have, just the running back in the flex, but Aaron Jones has like 58 targets already on the year, very involved in the passing game. I think that this is a viable lineup. I would prefer to have multiple pass catchers with Rodgers in the MVP, especially with one of them being a running back, especially when, this one only has a running back. It's a little bit thin as a lineup, but I think that it's at least plausible. It could win. And then we've also got Baker in the flex with Tutu, looks good. Same issue with this one. I've got Baker in the MVP now with Tutu in the flex, so just one pass catcher. Again, it's viable. Baker could score a rushing touchdown. There are ways for it to win, but it is a little bit thin, not necessarily the highest likelihood lineup. And then we've also got Rodgers with Jones here. Again, I think that's fine. So individually, I'm seeing, again, this one looks better to me. So I've got Baker in the flex with Tutu. This is my favorite so far with Rodgers and just Jones. Again, I'd rather pair Rodgers with wide receiver, tight end, but I think that it's viable, again, because Aaron Jones is so involved in the passing game. I guess this isn't all that surprising because these are just the guys. We're seeing the same, players over and over in these lineups, just different. The only difference being who's in the MVP in general, because these are the guys that just project the best and project the best point per dollar. So after I adjust projections a little bit, maybe these will change a little bit. But in general, I think these lineups individually, they each look like, okay, I could see a scenario where this lineup wins, but they are all pretty similar and they're all a little bit thin. Like none of them are really high likelihood lineups with Aaron Rodgers in there and no other actual receivers or tight ends. So plausible, but not necessarily my favorite lineups. Before I go back and change anything in groups, though, I'm just going to go through position by position and look at how much I'm getting of different players. All right, so getting to 41% Baker seems fine. 67% Rodgers looks good. Getting to, and I'm going to sort by salary here. A lot of Aaron Jones. Not a huge surprise there. Not much Cam Akers, only 6%. I think I'd want more than that of Cam Akers in this matchup against a pretty bad Packers run defense. A.J. Dillon, getting to 27% seems fine. Kieran Williams not getting to a ton. I think I'd like more than that of Kieran, especially if he's only 5% on it. He's probably a guy that I'm going to like playing on FanDuel tonight. Malcolm Brown not currently in the player pool. Maybe I'll just give him a boost up to 3, get him in the potential player pool at least. Wide receivers, as you can see, getting to just 17%. Christian Watson, I think I'd like to get more than that probably. Not getting too much Van Jefferson at all. I think that he's at least, he's got boom bust potential. So I think I'd like to get more than that of Van Jefferson. Alan Lazard. Randall Cobb, that's pretty interesting. He's clearly too expensive. Like he shouldn't be 9,500. So that's why you look at the projection, you look at the price tag, doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But then 2.4% ownership, I look at that and I think, maybe I'd want to play some Randall Cobb here. So I'll give him a little bit of a boost, try and get above that 2.4% number. Ben Skowronek. Want to make sure I get to some Skowronek. And Powell, not currently in the player pool because he projects for fewer than 3 fantasy points. I'm going to give him a little bit of a boost. I should say here, these are not actually my final decisions. I'll be doing a lot of research throughout the day to actually figure out how much I want of different players. So I say that I want to get to some Brandon Powell. Maybe after I do some research, I'll decide the opposite and I won't want to play in Brandon Powell. I suspect I will at 1% ownership, but have to see what his route participation looks like, stuff like that. And Randall Cobb, same thing. In a vacuum, currently, this looks good to me. I'm guessing that he is going to be on the field some, live to score a touchdown at very low ownership, but I'll have to see if he's actually as involved as I think he is in these games. Romeo Doubs, another guy that I think I want in my player pool. I'm going to bring up Powell as well. Samori Toure, maybe he gets more involvement now with Sammy Watkins waived. Not that Sammy Watkins was all that involved anyway, but we'll see. into a ton of Tutu Atwell. I'm not going to adjust his projection just yet. And then Austin Trammell, maybe get him into the player pool. All right, here's where I'm going to give the bigger boost, I think. Only getting to 19% Tyler Higbee. Maybe that's fine, but actually that seems like a fine number, but I'll give him a little boost just to keep up with the other players I've given boost to. And then Robert Tonyan, I probably want more than 6%. These three guys, Hopkins, Seguara, Lewis, none of them currently in my player pool. Maybe I'll just give them boost to get into the player pool. All right, getting to 18% Mason Crosby, 6% Matt Gay. Maybe I'll give Gay a little bit of a boost. And then defenses, getting to a good amount of the Packers, not much of the Rams. Maybe I'll give the Rams a little bit of a boost. All right, right away here we see here, this looks better. Rodgers in the MVP spot with multiple pass catchers. That is my preference. And then Tutu Atwell on the comeback. I like this lineup a lot better than the ones I was seeing in the last set. Here we've got Rodgers in the flex with just Aaron Jones. I think it's more viable to have just Rodgers and Jones with Jones in the MVP spot and Rodgers in the flex. I like that better than the opposite. So I think this looks fine with Baker and Tutu obviously correlated as well. This one has Baker with multiple pass catchers plus Cam Akers, Jones on the bring back. That looks good. Yeah, in general, I think I'm liking these lineups better than the last set. Rodgers with Jones. Still getting a lot of Aaron Rodgers with just Aaron Jones and no other pass catchers. You know, it's not my favorite thing. I'd probably like this lineup a little bit better if this were Christian Watson or Alan Lazard. I don't want to see too much of just Rodgers with Jones, and I'm still getting to a ton of that, which maybe that's just because Jones projects so well, point per dollar, that I'm just getting so much of him. But okay, so here, yeah, no Rodgers there. Here's Rodgers with Watson. I like this one better because I've got Watson in there as well. Rodgers with Jones still in Lazard looks good. Baker with multiple. In general, I like this lineup set a lot better than the first one I did. They look better correlated, a little bit more even on the exposures. But I am still seeing a ton of this Rodgers with Jones. I'm almost inclined to go in and in those Rodgers flex groups, give boost to the other pass catchers, even maybe give a negative boost to Jones. I don't know that I really want to, but you know, if I did something like this, maybe even smaller than. I think 4% is good, and then give a little bit of a positive boost to, say, Lazard, Dobbs, and Watson, Tonyan. See if this maybe flips it a little bit in favor of getting more of these pass catchers. You know, it's not something I want to make a big boost here. I don't want to really change things all that much. But maybe I want a little bit more of, who am I missing here? Watson. Oh, Watson. Okay. Let's see if that does anything. All right, so didn't change all that much. My concern with, I want to do small boost because I don't want it to be like don't have Rodgers and Jones together at all. I just want to, slightly affect the correlations a little bit. And of course, right away we see here Rodgers with Jones, Rodgers with just Jones. So did not affect all that much so far. Rodgers with Jones and Lazard. All right, here, Rodgers with Lazard looks good. Rodgers with Lazard, Jones, Watson. Rodgers with Lazard. Okay, so now we are seeing, I think, a little bit more. Maybe it did affect it a little bit at least. So now I'm getting to some more with Rodgers and pass catchers, not just Jones. Yeah, so here we see Rodgers in the MVP with just Jones. I think these are a little bit better. Again, I'm not going to go through the whole process, but this is generally my approach is I start off by making correlations. I look through the lineups. I crunch out a 150 set, look at what the lineups look like, look what the player exposures look like, and then it's just trial and error from there. It's just do I want to get more or less of this correlation, like the one I just did with Rodgers and Jones, trying to make that a little bit less of a strong correlation. And am I getting to player exposures that I want? And then I just adjust in the groups for different correlations, and then I adjust player exposures going position by position. You can see here I'm getting to now under 1% RAM, so now I'd probably go back and give a boost there, and I just go again down the line, position by position, making minor adjustments until I get to exposures that I like, and looking at the lineups, changing correlations until I get to correlations that I like. That is the process. Not going to do the 20 crunches I might do later tonight after inactives come out. I just want to give you a general idea of what the process looks like for me using Fantasy Cruncher. Anyway, hope you can find some success tonight using this or a similar process. Good luck.